As I mentioned in the theoretical introduction, the variation is mainly about the arising endgames, but that white also has other plans at his disposal, that is attacking black's king. In order to illustrate this thought, I will show you the game Saric-Gurevich. It is a pretty fresh game, 2007 February it was played. E4, E6, D4, D5, Knight C3, Knight F6. All the main moves which we are acquainted with by now. Knight F3, Knight C6, Bishop E3, and Bishop E7. And it is surprising, slightly surprising, that this very natural move was so rarely played. Black is preparing castling and wants to define his plans later. One of the reasons could be that for many years it was considered necessary for black to go for positions after c takes d4, knight d4, bishop c5, and that black was afraid to lose tempo with bishop e7. But in fact, there are also other ideas. After bishop e7, we know that queen d2 castles, and castling long is suspect because of c4, preparing b5, which could give black a very good attack. So very often the move d takes c5 proves necessary, and then after bishop c5 we get a similar position, with the only difference that the white knight is on f3 and not on d4, and it's difficult to say where it is better placed. On d4 it is subject to exchanges, but on the other hand this is still the ideal square for the knight, so it is just a different position, and one could not really say if black has won a tempo or lost a tempo. In fact, in the game Saric-Gurevich, white took on c5 immediately, castles, and queen d2, but this is a slight transposition. And here black has a choice. In fact, knight takes c5 is also a possibility, but many believe that in general the bishop on e3 is more active than the bishop on e7, and black, having a slightly passive position, should be aiming to exchange some pieces. So bishop c5 is a more classical approach, castles long, and queen a5. Now the queen on a5 creates new ideas for black. That is, for instance, knight b4 becomes a possibility, with some ideas to create counterplay against the pawn on a2. Sometimes black exerts pressure on the square c3 after eventual bishop d7, rook f c8, and also black's play could pretty much depend on what white is doing. So in this game, white went bishop c5, knight c5, king b1, very often a useful move, bishop d7, and now one of the ideas could be to play h4, followed by rook h3. There could also be the other ideas, of course. Saric played very normal looking bishop d3, but after knight b4 he had to solve some pretty concrete problems. Black is developing some counterplay. A2 is potentially weak. Black also gets ideas like rook fc8 and eventually rook c3, or he can work with ideas like bishop a4, putting pressure on d3, c2, and so on. But in fact, white could also defend against all these threats, but it is interesting to see that he just decided to ignore them and to develop the play of his own, and thus the play became extremely sharp. White played knight d4, rook fc8, and g4. And black decided that the position is ripe for action, played bishop a4. And now we see that black's concentration on the queen side is really serious now, and normally white would be concerned about his king's safety and would maybe start playing moves like rook c1 in order to defend, but Saric decided he has enough positional grounds, that is some superiority in the center for kingside activity, and just went f5. And after f5, knight bd3, c takes d3, bishop d1. You see that black just won the exchange, but in fact he has no major threats anymore, and white was able to proceed with f6. So we see how quickly the game, instead of normal for this variation ending, the game started in a completely different fashion. White is rook down at the moment, threatening queen g5, and black should normally have enough resources to thwart the attack, but let's see what happened. So queen g5 is an unpleasant threat, and Gurevich decided that the best is to play g takes f6, e takes f6, and king h8, preparing rook g8. And in fact, for the moment, it is not even so clear what white ideas could be, but in fact, he calmly recaptures the bishop on d1, and now we see that, in fact, white could also have long-term compensation. He could still have ideas like h4, g5. He could have the transfer knight f3, knight e5, or sometimes he could work with ideas like queen h6, and then knight f3, g5. And because for the moment black's pieces are not doing so much, Gurevich thought it wise to exchange a knight, play knight a4, knight takes a4, queen takes a4, and knight f3. And now we see another idea of Saric. He spotted that on e5 the knight will have a wonderful position, and that this might compensate for all white's material losses. Black was also probably happy to transfer his queen to the defense. So after queen g4, knight e5, black played queen h5. So the queen is very important on h5, defending the pawn on f7, the square h6, and also controlling the rook on d1, so as to check the movements of the queen on d2. And it almost looks as if white doesn't have any initiative anymore, but in fact the knight on e5 is so strong that white always has some play against black's king, because some of the pieces will always be tied to the defense of the pawn on f7. So Saric just played rook e1, and black played rook c7, defending the pawn on f7. In fact, it might have been better for him to do something else, because at the moment it is not so clear what white is threatening. But on the other hand, his play is not so easy. He always has to check threats like, for instance, even queen h6. For instance, if he goes b5, queen h6, queen takes h6, knight f7 check, knight h6 check, followed by rook g1. This could lead to a very serious attack. Also, his other possibilities are somehow limited. He could go into passivity with rook f8, but this is also not maybe helping in the long run. So it is a pretty complex position, which is difficult for black to play, and in short, he started to make some maybe inaccuracies. He went rook c7, but this allowed very strong rook g1, and now because black cannot take queen e5, queen h6 was made, and cannot play rook g8 because of rook takes g8 followed by queen g2, queen g7 and mate. It is not at all clear what he should be playing. In fact, white also is not threatening so much yet, because after queen g2, queen h6 will be a defense, but to defend passively is not everybody's thing, and it is also clear that white might try to improve the position of his pieces, for instance by playing a3, king a2, just to put the king into safety, then maybe play d4 to defend the knight on e5, and then try to penetrate with the queen. So on the whole, a pretty difficult situation for black to handle in a practical game, and he erred immediately with queen h4. The move looks pretty attractive. He wants to attack the pawn on f6. Once this pawn is gone, he will have no trouble anymore, but for a second the defense of the vital square f7 has been weakened, and knight f7 would be just made, because the rook is on g1, the king on h8 doesn't have any moves, so we have good grounds to look for some combination, and this combination turned out to be queen c2. And now you see that the rook is distracted from the defense of the pawn on f7, and it is also not clear what black can do about it. Maybe initially Gurevich wanted to play something like queen d4, attacking the rook on g1, but then I guess the switchback queen g2 decides the battle with a mate on g7. So after queen c2, it seems that black cannot protect the rook satisfactorily, and even the rook a8 natural looking loses against knight f7, rook f7 with mate. And so black basically had to admit that this part of the game his opponent played better than him, and played rook e7. It's a clear case of complete desperation. And after f takes e7, queen e7, white could of course win in many different ways, but the most efficient was knight takes f7, followed by mate after queen takes f7, queen c3, and now black can give couple of pawns, but after this he will have to resign. So a very interesting game, also for this opening. Also, just otherwise, it's interesting to see first of all that white has also dynamic possibilities in this position, not just going for this ending, and to note that in a position like this, that the permanent weakness of the king on h8 and the incredible position of the knight on e5 could possibly compensate the exchange and the pawn, even with white not having so many attacking pieces. So a great dynamic and positional achievement of Saric.